Everyone loves crossovers and everyone loves Kirby, but for some reason Mario Kart 8 Deluxe included F-Zero tracks without Captain Falcon and added Animal Crossing characters before anyone who actually started a fun racer before. That decision planted the seed for the idea of a future Nintendo Kart, and it raised a big question: how do you differentiate a potential follow-up from the incredible foundation we were left with? The answer is Mario Kart World, an open world fun racer that already does more than enough to stand on its own. Most importantly, it takes full advantage of the Switch 2's hardware in ways never imagined before. 24 racers, a huge connected world, 60 FPS with 4 players, and the biggest character selection of all time. As a result, there's no longer a need for additional Nintendo representation. Mario Kart World has already set a standard for the series and doesn't have to rely on external icons to boost its appeal, at least not during the announcement phase. If Mario Kart 8 Deluxe taught us anything, then it's the value of exceeding expectations. With nearly 100 tracks, it offers the greatest variety of any titles in the franchise. Quite ironic considering its lackluster start on the Wii U. World is set to become Nintendo's cash cow for the Switch 2 in the years ahead. They even implemented it as a character, and I have no doubt there are still a few surprises we haven't seen yet. However, when the novelty of the open world starts to wear off, it will be the perfect time to reintroduce a few special Nintendo characters. In this video, I'm going to explain why Kirby currently makes the most logical sense, the role of Air Riders plays in that story, and in what capacity he might appear. First of all, we have to establish the necessity of including Nintendo veterans. As I stated in the beginning, World manages its legacy just fine and doesn't need to hide behind 8 Deluxe or other similarly powerful franchises. Since the announcement, I haven't seen a single person even mention the possibility of further crossovers. And personally, I don't need them either. The strange novelty of having nearly every Mario creature be playable needs some room to breathe, and that uniqueness would have been undermined by the inclusion of more prominent, well-known characters. Beyond subjective preference, I feel like crossovers are likely to happen anyway, albeit in smaller proportions, and the only way Nintendo characters could realistically be included is through DLC. World receiving DLC feels as inevitable as King Dedede getting a redesign, and it only makes sense to support what is expected to be the Switch 2's most important title throughout its lifespan. While the discussion of DLC probably warrants its own video, predicting its implementation is much more complicated than guessing the content. Tracks, new characters and costumes are a safe bet, but how do they actually plan to structure downloadable additions within the game's map? Unlike in previous entries, each course now has to be naturally connected to the world and properly contextualized. We haven't seen the entire map in detail yet, and there may be oddly empty spaces that were deliberately left out for future DLC, but since Nintendo's already charging a small fortune plus my grandma, creating the impression that content is being held back might not be the best idea. Similar to modern Pokemon titles, DLC could offer not just a handful of new courses, but an entirely new medium-sized world separate from the base game. If the Switch 2 is powerful enough, there's also the possibility of expanding the existing map, although I can imagine they are already pushing its limits. Judging by the game's title, this edition could be called Nintendo World, or giving credit to one of the Wii U's best titles, Nintendo Land. I envision it as a kind of amusement park with different zones and tracks based on famous Nintendo IPs. Think of Super Mario World in real life, where there's a dedicated Mario area now supplemented by the newly completed Donkey Kong Country section. At best, the company loves to remind players of every possible intellectual property they are actively promoting, proving by the fact that Donkey Kong's design now closely resembles his movie counterpart. Ideally, players would associate a potential Nintendo Land DLC with their visit to Super Nintendo World, creating a sense of familiarity and a stronger incentive to purchase the downloadable content. Mario Kart World is a flexible term. When it's phrased in the singular, it's easily adaptable to suggest the introduction of multiple new worlds in the future. You have to consider how cautious Nintendo must have been when naming their most important new Mario Kart game, especially in a console with backwards compatibility to 8 Deluxe. The expected numerical continuation, 9 or even 10, was waiting to be considered, but Tour complicated the conversation with its unclear status as either a mainline entry or a spin-off. Nintendo seems to have aimed for the perfect balance, positioning World as a brand new experience while simultaneously highlighting the game's core appeal. The title also subtly hints at the potential for future content, with the subtitle serving as both a statement and a potential promise. There is a cynical possibility that Nintendo characters were introduced in Mario Kart 8 simply because the company was struggling with the Wii U and needed a hype-worthy announcement to boost sales. Back then their DLC cost only $12, but now we can place a cow, so really, what am I even comparing? Maybe Nintendo feels World doesn't need that kind of boost, but for the sake of argument, let's assume Nintendo characters are returning. Zelda, Splatoon and Animal Crossing are very likely. But honestly, they are also boringly predictable. I can see maybe Link coming back with 2 or 3 other series celebrating their debut. Captain Falcon was already robbed a place as a character, but kinda resurfaced thanks to Nintendo Switch Online, or F-Zero 99, and they could be going for another sleeper pick, such as Pikmin. Both contrast fantastically for designing courses, and it's another great excuse for Nintendo to keep F-Zero on life support without developing a full new title. Kirby on the other hand fits so amazingly into Mario Kart, it was honestly a shock he wasn't a part of 8's DLC. If you show a picture of Kirby to your mother and let her guess which Nintendo series he's coming from, she will most likely either predict it's Pokemon or Mario, and he complements the existing roster effortlessly. With Mario Kart, there are no clear rules about what a character needs to offer to become playable. At this point, World has thrown every apparent rule out of the window and put bees and crabs in karts. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if a literal question block showed up as a driver. Now Mario Kart fans know the treat to have every random character playable. What makes a possible newcomer more appealing are the different costumes, one of the main features carried over from Tour. I'm not entirely sure how the mechanic works or if it's purely cosmetic, but across the map you can collect those glowing fast food bag looking items to change appearances. They could just be collectibles scattered around the open world to encourage exploration, but I've heard players say that the fast food bags give them a speed boost similar to a mushroom when controlling random characters like the cow. I don't expect those kind of drivers to have costumes, but marketing a new character with a set of artistically varied skins makes a far stronger impression in the next Nintendo Direct than reintroducing Pink Gold Peach again. Kirby fits so perfectly as a driver because he offers a plethora of alternative costumes, something that has been heavily emphasized in modern entries of the series. Pick any Kirby game and you will find at least a dozen costume options to choose from, and the Warp Star serves as a perfectly fitting kart substitute. Apparently gliders and wheels are no longer a part of the equation, so they wouldn't even need to worry about designing those components. The mere inclusion of Kirby as a driver is a surefire success from both a gameplay and marketing perspective. It requires no deep research and is relatively straightforward to animate. Up to this point, my personal bias may have been the main driving force, but now it's time to argue for Kirby's inclusion from a more logical, conclusive perspective. The strongest evidence that Kirby might be within reach is naturally the announcement of Kirby Air Riders and the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. It may have been just one announcement among many, but the context of its reveal was particularly notable. Air Riders is a meaningful follow-up that shows care for a spin-off over 20 years old, and it could very well be a part of a broader strategy to signal that the Switch 2 will embrace the past, reviving classics that once seemed forgotten. The announcement of a new 3D Donkey Kong and the launch of GameCube titles further reinforced this impression. But there's one major issue. Air Riders was revealed in the same Direct as Mario Kart World. No matter how different the two games may be, they are both perceived and will be marketed as fun racers. The similarities continue. 8 Deluxe received DLC randomly a couple years later, and so did the Forgotten Land apparently, literally the same. Mario Kart will launch alongside the Switch 2, while Air Riders is set for a release sometime in 2025. But the reality is, any fun racer that launches after Mario Kart automatically competes with the biggest powerhouse in the genre. Furthermore, it begs the question, why did Nintendo choose to present Air Riders at all? The Forgotten Land and Star-Crossed World already established Kirby as a continued presence on the Switch 2, building on upgraded titles from the previous generation and generating plenty of excitement with their expansions. Theoretically, there was no need to spotlight Kirby again, and I doubt the announcement of Sakurai's involvement alone was enough to justify it. Unless, of course, there's a calculated strategy behind it. The Switch 2 Direct was likely Nintendo's most carefully planned presentation to date, not just needing to make a strong first impression, but to create long-term excitement that convinces viewers to invest in a new console generation. Every major reveal had to contribute to the image of the Switch 2 as a must-buy system. And with all due respect and appreciation for Kirby, Air Riders probably wasn't one of those reveals, at least not on the surface. It was a nostalgic explosion, turning the impossible into reality, but mainly for a niche group of dedicated GameCube fans. That broader appeal was limited, especially since no gameplay was shown. Yet the way Nintendo introduced the trailer, the slowed fade to black, the fully CGI reveal, the focus on the director, carried the same energy and presentation style they reserve for their biggest titles. It felt deliberate. It felt confident. If Nintendo had wanted to, they could have easily saved Air Riders for a summer direct, revealing it properly with gameplay, features and a full breakdown. But they didn't. Instead, they choose to plant the idea of a Kirby-themed fundraiser within the same presentation as Mario Kart World, subtly linking the two in the viewer's mind. Air Riders will absolutely stand on its own, and anyone who played the original on the GameCube knows this. Despite sharing the same genre on paper, the two games couldn't be more different in execution. In fact, we still don't even know what direction Air Riders will take. It's been more than 20 years since Air Ride, so it wouldn't be surprising if Air Riders ends up redefining the original at its core. Whatever form it takes, Air Riders and Mario Kart World could coexist in a kind of symbiotic relationship. Mario Kart benefiting from the star power of additional franchises, and Kirby gaining exposure to a massive audience. That's why I believe Kirby's inclusion in Mario Kart is not just likely, but strategically sound, and why the joint announcement of Air Riders and World in the same direct is no coincidence. Kirby's new spin-off is scheduled for release sometime in 2025, though it's safe to assume it won't arrive before the fall. The Forgotten Land and Star Across the World need some time, just like the announcement of Mario Kart DLC. If Nintendo sticks to their usual pattern of a summer direct followed by a September presentation, that would be the perfect moment to boast about Mario Kart's early success and emphasize its longevity by revealing downloadable content. Kirby Air Riders would then follow shortly after, with the prospect of controlling Kirby in Mario Kart arriving either in winter or sometime later. But what do you think about all of this? Would you want to race as Kirby in Mario Kart, or do you think other Nintendo characters are more deserving of a spot? If nothing happens at all, can we at least get Rob back? I just want to play as my favorite Nintendo toy again.